Good afternoon and welcome to Streaming News 2021, a virtual half-day conference presented by TV News Check to look at some of the most important issues facing news organizations in streaming today. I'm Michael Depp, editor of TV News Check, and I'm very pleased to be presenting today's program to you. Today's event comes to you in 4 parts. First, we've got a panel on building and expanding audiences, a fireside chat, Storytelling 360, reinventing collaborative news production everywhere, and then a panel on best practices for generating revenue. Finally, we've got an interactive roundtable called Fastlane, Technology in the Road to Boosting Audience and Revenue. We want you, the audience, to be part of this discussion, and we're interested in your questions, so please submit them using the Q&A button at the bottom of your Zoom screen, and we'll do our best to address them. We're going to jump right in just a moment, but first I'd like to thank our title sponsor, Delet, our roundtable sponsor, Imagi, and event sponsor, Wide Orbit, for helping to make our program possible today. And I would like to invite Frederick Rue, VP Sales Americas at Delet, to say a few opening words to kick us off.
Thanks, Michael. So at Delet, for 30 years, we've been providing solution and technology to media organizations all around the world with a very strong emphasis on news organization and news workflow. And this year is a very big year for us because we're announcing a brand new generation of a solution, which is called Pyramid. So Pyramid is a web-based, cloud-native, end-to-end news production platform that you can host and deploy in a variety of ways, in a public cloud, private data center, on-prem, and of course in distributed environment to enable the highly distributed workforce that we have to deal with today. But the second thing we really wanted to put some effort in with this new platform is rethinking what is the story-centric approach of those platforms, thinking outside of the rundown and bringing a whole new generation of user experience and tools to enable what we call Storytelling 360. So Raul Cospen, our director of news product strategy, is going to spend some time later in the day to give you some insight and to show it to you. And so we're very excited to present that product, and we can't wait to spend some time with you all face-to-face, hopefully, during NAB, and to show it to you more in detail. Thank you for your time, and I hope you have a great event. And thank you again, Michael.
Thank you so much, Frederick, and we'll look forward to hearing more from Delet in just a little while. So now it is my privilege to introduce our first panel, who will speak to the topic of building and expanding audiences on streaming. I want to first welcome John Accorino, the Executive Director of Business Development at Bonneville Salt Lake, KSL. Suzanne Mai, the Senior Vice President of CBS News Digital. Steph Rykowski, Senior Director of Digital Integrations and OTT at Gray Television. And Jeff Zelmer, VP of Digital Marketing and Strategic Partnerships at Fox-owned stations. Thanks to all of you for joining this conversation, and apologies for the technical glitches that we had at the outset here, but let's jump right in and start talking. So let's start with just kind of getting a level set on where viewers are, just in terms of their receptivity or even an expectation of finding news options on streaming. We started streaming as sort of a platform for entertainment. I just wonder if each of you could just chime in briefly. How much is it of an uphill climb to convince that viewers even know news is there? John, you want to take that first?
Sure. And I would say today audiences are much more receptive to streaming content. COVID-19 actually really helped audience adoption, especially in our market in Salt Lake City. We saw a lot of shifting in the news. Also, as people consolidated their budgets, they might have parted ways with their cable providers. So there's big demand for streaming, and then we saw a lot of time shifting. So we saw our morning news, TV ratings decline, and then our streaming numbers start to increase. So there's definitely demand for local news in our market, and streaming is a great way to provide that content to our users.
Suzanne, what do you think?
Yeah, I would echo that. CBSN has been around for 6+ years at this point. So I think we've sort of seen the increase in engagement and interest. It's always dicey when you start something, whether you want to be a little ahead of the curve, but not too ahead of the curve. And I think that we've definitely seen consistent growth over all those years. But certainly last year, between COVID, streaming in general becoming more mainstream. So people just getting more comfortable cutting the cord and then saying, where am I going to find my news? Certainly, there was a lot of news last year between the racial injustice and the protests and COVID and a presidential election, so that people, I think, were really, those cord cutters were looking for places to find their news. And so we certainly at CBSN saw a huge increase in our audience.
Steph, does that track with your experience?
Oh yeah, definitely. And I think it's an expectation too. I mean, just like the others have said with COVID and everything and all the, streaming and everything, everybody being hooked up digitally and whatnot. If you're not streaming, if you're not part of those platforms that they're already going to on a daily basis, then you're going to be left behind. So.
And Jeff, do we have a chorus of agreement here?
I don't think it's an uphill battle. The expectation is on us. They expect us to be there. We get enough emails, messages. Where do we find you streaming? I mean, that's where we need to be. If there's any uphill battle, it's on our side that we struggle to get there in the right way for the users.
Okay, so this panel aims to get to the heart of how to build and expand audiences for streaming news apps. And one of the cornerstones of that is the content proposition that you have for viewers. So what do we know right now about viewers' expectations for what they should find there? Do they want original streaming news content, something that they can't get on linear? Do they want simulcasts of the linear broadcast? Do they want both? Let's see, what do viewers want? Steph, let's start with you.
Sure. I think we definitely see that the live and local as being one of the key parts of OTT success. And I think for the most part, they come for the live news, and they also want the live local events, such as your local high school sporting events or your breaking news, the severe weather coverage and whatnot. But I also think that they're looking for we as broadcasters, I think, need to keep them there as well. I mean, give them a reason to stay. And I think that's one of the reasons why Gray is really focusing on the 24/7 live channels. So yeah, you'll always have those viewers that are expecting to see the replay of a newscast, but we're kind of stepping away from that. We're going to make those available to the viewer within the OTT app, but we are really focusing on keeping our streams live 24/7. So giving them the live local news that they want, but then also continuing through with those streams, just basically keeping them there as long as possible.
So Jeff, the Fox stations zigged where many others zagged in terms of offering more niche streaming product out of the gate. The first one was Fox Soul. What have you learned from that experience so far in terms of taking a niche approach to finding an audience? You didn't count on a pandemic happening just after launch, of course.
Broadcasters are kind of notorious for not taking risks. We look for the big traditional audience normally, and we look for things that have worked before, and changing things is really hard. But that doesn't have to be that way in the streaming space. And I think what Fox Soul and what that team and what we've learned in this space is that by targeting this really very focused audience, we can actually listen to them more closely and be more flexible. We can test things, we can adjust, we can just constantly optimize the stream at a speed that you can't do in the broadcast area. In the end, it's really not how many users, it's how engaged are they, how long are they watching. So if we can get that a small number of loyal users to watch for a long time and really care about the content, they can quickly become more valuable than the large number that might only watch for a minute. And I mean, really, my marketing self, like targeted focused audiences are why advertisers originally flocked to digital. They could spend money on a small group that was more likely to take a desired action. So why not try that with content too, is kind of what we're trying here. And that flexibility has been really important. And we're seeing it work with Soul. Even as monthly users have fluctuated due to things like the pandemic and other things throughout the year, the consistent growth in viewing time has just been consistently growing, up 30% even this year since January for Soul. So it's a trend we hope to keep building on and being successful.
So at the same time, Fox has News Now, which is a live, constantly streaming, constantly updated state, and that's updated out of, or rather that originates out of Phoenix, and now Los Angeles and Orlando, was it?
Orlando, yes.
Orlando, sorry. So are you simultaneously going to stay on the niche trajectory and open up some more niche offerings in the coming months or year?
Look, the short answer is we want to provide content that users want in the simplest and easiest way for them to get it. So that could be niche, that could be straightforward. I think behind it, it's why are people turning to streaming, period. You know, a lot of people say it's because of cost. I don't think that's the case because people pay for streaming subscriptions. I think a good part of it is that people aren't finding what they want easily on the broadcast and cable that they've been used to. So that's why we need a bit of both. We need to provide the different types of content, but all of it should be keeping in mind why people are turning to streaming. And that's what we did with News Now. It was a direct response. We knew people wanted to seek out news the moment it was happening. Why not go all in on that? We can test it in this space, go be essentially the red zone of news and get viewers to the news fast, even if it's a more raw experience. We're not going to slow the user down. So yes, we're going to test and try straightforward. We're going to try niche, but in the end, it's all taking into account how a streaming audience behaves instead of just copying what we've done on broadcast, since they left that for a reason. And lastly, you know, especially with Tubi now being such a big part of Fox's strategy, I'm actually really excited of all the different types of content we can experiment with and see what different users really want to watch.
Suzanne, as you mentioned, CBS has been out there for years with lots of original news content, both nationally and locally, and you've had a good bit of runway to perhaps recalibrate around what kind of content viewers seem to want. What have you learned in that experience so far about viewers' expectations?
Well, I mean, what we've learned is that viewers do want live content, certainly, and that has been our mantra in general, is really leaning into covering what's happening. And certainly 2020 was a year where there was a lot happening live all the time. The local piece is important. Again, 2020, there were these national stories that played out locally: the election, COVID, all of these things. Having 10 local CBSNs up and running was so, I wish I could say that we planned it. I mean, we knew that local was important, obviously, for our users, but it was sort of the perfect storm in terms of being, and the fact that we had a CBSN in Minneapolis. I mean, the fact that we could cover what was happening there related to George Floyd and then the trial really gave us an opportunity to bring people sort of national stories, but from a local perspective, which is what people want, right? We all know that people love their local news, and they have a relationship with their local anchors. So when the story's playing out and we can lean into the local coverage of those stories, that's always a real win in terms of what people are engaging with.
Another cornerstone of finding and retaining audiences is around user experience and app design of your owned and operated apps. Of course, UX always aims to be intuitive and frictionless. I'm wondering what all of you are learning about optimal design from a UX perspective and how that directly impacts audience retention on your apps. Maybe Stephanie, can you start with that?
Sure. We actually just did a little bit of a trial with our station WOIO with placement as far as what we call swim lanes, or different channel content lanes within our OTT apps. And obviously, it's no surprise that you need to make sure that you're placing your good content at the top, and that but you're not cramming everything on there. The problem that I think that some of our stations have right now is that they just want to put everything on there. So you'll come to our OTT app, you'll load it up, the live stream is presented at the top, but then below that you have different selections that you can, kind of like, Netflix. But what we need to do as on our side is just to educate them and say, okay, you don't need to pile on all the little clips that you did of the newscast. You need to be more selective of what you're choosing to put within those, what we call swim lanes, or different sections of the app. So I think just making it easy for the user to find the content they want is very key on this. But make sure your live's at the top, make sure any breaking news area is at the top as well. And then below that is fair game, but just keep it light.
Okay. John, you've talked before about the importance of a consistency of UX across different device types and platforms. Can you speak a little bit to the importance of having a consistent face?
Sure. So when we first launched KSL TV's connected TV and mobile apps, we made the conscious decision to focus on the video experience. So if you open up the KSL TV app on your smartphone, it's going to look and feel exactly the same on the connected TV apps. We did that to create a video first connected experience so people didn't have to relearn an interface. So there's no text articles on the KSL TV app on your smartphone. If you want to read the text articles, you can just go to our website. It's all just video. And we did that for 3 different reasons. Number one, engagement. Audiences tend to spend more time watching video content than reading an article, at least in our market. Number 2, revenue. So video ads drive a lot higher revenue than display ads, CPM-wise. And number 3, just the user experience. We just wanted to be real clean and familiar between mobile and connected TV, and just a great user experience. And we've stuck with that since we launched, and it's been really good for us and for our audience.
Jeff, simplicity, is that the key?
I think so. I mean, I believe people are going to gravitate to the easiest to use platform that meets a minimum standard. So you could have the best content in the world, but if it takes 3 extra clicks to get it to play, you're going to lose to the average content that only takes 1 click to play. I've always said, like, just make the path to viewing as short and simple as possible. It's very easy to get excited about all the extra features. What else can the app do? What else can we show people? That I worry we too often forget that in the end, most people just want to watch.
Is this why people tend to stay away from VOD menus versus the live linear feed? There's just too much in VOD, or spoiled for choice?
It might be. Too many options, they don't make a choice properly.
Mm-hmm. Any other thoughts just before we move on off of UX? Any thoughts about best practices that anyone would offer as advice besides what we've covered here? If not, let's shift right on to Suzanne. You're doing video push alerts at CBS. I wonder, can you explain, we all know what push alerts are, but can you explain how those work?
Yeah, sure. That's something we launched January of 2020 on the tvOS platform, and then rolled out on Roku in October, just in time for elections. And it's really a way, because we now have these 10 live local feeds coming in, and then we have the national CBS, and what we were finding is, I mean, our goal is to keep people in the ecosystem. We were talking before about engagement time, and to keep people in that ecosystem as long as possible. And the way to do that is to keep showing them things that they might be interested in. And so our product team developed this, and it's pretty amazing, because I remember just like conceiving of it, and then, I don't know, 9 months later, there it was. And so if you're watching on an OTT platform, tvOS or Roku, currently it's going to be rolling out to the other platforms, and you're watching the main CBSN stream, for example, on election night, and there's a big, there obviously Pennsylvania, and what was happening in Pennsylvania was a big story, right? So we'd have our main sort of national election coverage, but our CBSN Philly team would be covering their election from a Pennsylvania perspective. And so they might have some local election person on their stream, and so what would happen is this little alert pops up that says, watch an interview on your OTT platform. Click here to watch the interview with the head of elections in Pennsylvania, and you can click on it, and it takes you immediately into the CBSN Philadelphia stream. And if you don't click on it after some period of time, which we tested, what's the right period of time, it just disappears, or you can dismiss it. And so, sorry, go ahead.
What's the size of the push? What is it?
It's like it's a little rectangular up in the right-hand corner of your TV. So it doesn't block anything, but you can definitely see it. And you can click dismiss, or again, you can just wait and it'll go away. When we first launched it, people weren't engaging with it as much as we had expected. And we realized that a lot of people put these 24-hour news, as I think some people who have linear do with CNN, you put it up and you just leave it on. And so if you're not in front of it, right, you don't see the push alert. And so we sort of tested to optimize the amount of time so that it's up long enough so people who can see it click it, but there's also, you know, some point you want it to go away, but there's also a dismiss button so people can make it go away. So yeah, I mean, we saw a lot of engagement with it, particularly around elections, coronavirus updates, you know, when de Blasio or Cuomo would come on and give their updates every day in the early days. Sometimes we would carry that on the mainstream, but maybe there's something else happening that is a higher priority and it's not being carried on the mainstream. You'd get a little note that said CBSN New York, Governor Cuomo, live update, click here to watch now. And it would take you to the CBSN New York stream. What
was the optimal amount of time to leave it up, did you find, before it would?
I don't remember exactly. I mean, I think we did it like a minute at first. It needed to be longer than that. It's a couple of minutes at this point. Again, you know, it's that fine line between being too disruptive, but making people aware that it exists.
So related to UX is quality control. And I wonder, and this is for any of you to take, where are viewers expressing their biggest frustrations? Latency, buffering, audio not working on the webinar? Any thoughts about where you're finding the most friction on that side?
I'll start with that, Michael. That's tricky because it could come down to your technical infrastructure or the average connection availability for the people in your market. So people in more rural areas are going to have more trouble streaming high quality video content. But it really comes down to the technical partners you choose. We went through a few different partners to keep our buffering and streaming really strong and consistent. We finally settled with a company called Bit Central and their Fuel product, and that seemed to be a perfect fit for us. But you want to have that strong infrastructure and don't cheap out when it comes to your partners, and definitely pick the right partner that's going to fit your unique situation for your audience.
Anybody else have any tips to add on quality control from their experience? Okay, well, one of the other things I want to talk about, finding your audience for streaming news means that the audience needs to find you. A big part of that is being available on as many different platforms as possible. So enter the VMVPDs. Have they become essential conduits to new viewers? And is it a fair label to call them gatekeepers into the streaming space at this point? Anybody can take that one.
Yeah, I'll jump in on that. I don't know if they're gatekeepers in the way that Comcast and Time Warner were when you had a linear channel, because there are other options, right? There's so many different platforms to be on, whether it's, you know, a Samsung platform within the TV or your own app, or for us, you know, we're on Paramount Plus. I don't necessarily think it's as make or break as the sort of traditional MVPDs were for the linear. I think there's just more options at this point. And I also think, and I'm sure everybody feels this way, like it's good to achieve through others, through these partners, whether it's Fubo or, you know, a partnership with Yahoo or Zumo or Pluto or whoever it is. But the real opportunity is when you have someone download your native app, because you have a much closer relationship with them. You can push alert to them. You can just engage with them more. It's in that sense, I don't think it's changed at all, right? Which is like the direct relationship with the consumer is 10 times more valuable than having to go through Fubo or somebody like that.
Sure.
Well, and I also think we have to be very strategic about where we're putting our content. I mean, the most valuable assets as broadcast stations is our station's content. So it's not like we're just gonna, you know, oh, let's just put it everywhere and just pray that somebody finds it. I think that we as a team over here, we're trying to make sure that it makes sense to our, you know, our end goals and not just put it anywhere. So.
Now, Steph, for you, Viewit is an important partner in your ecosystem. Can you explain to people who may not know that relationship, what it is?
Sure. So Viewit is it's one of our platforms that is provided by our video provider. They created it. They're very focused on live and local, which again is something that we're very focused on as well. And it's just another place for us to put our content confidently and then have the content available to users who just, may be streaming randomly within every day, and we can find all of our newscasts are on there, and it's another way for us to just share our product out with those folks. But then we also they stitch in our L&L channel, which is our 24/7 news channel within Gray. So when our stations are not live with their live local newscasts, we're stitching in that content and streaming that 24/7 as well. So we partnered with View It just because of how they're looking toward OTT, and it really pairs well with how we are as well. So.
Okay, I'm just curious, just to go around the whole group and start with you, Steph. Who is in charge at your companies of managing the VM-VPD relationships? And not necessarily a person, but who, what position handles that?
It's actually a collaborative effort on our end. We do have our OTT support team, which I'm the lead of. And then we also work very closely with our legal department at Gray. So they handle all of the contractual agreements and whatnot, and they are very good at what they do, which is great, because then as we work closely with the CBSs and the Foxes and the NBCs, everything is so complex and it's so different across the board. So for our stations, for us to expect them to keep it all straight, it's not going to happen. So what we do is we have them, if there are issues, they will email our OTT support channel or our email, and we'll hop in there. We'll say, okay, this is NBC related. So then we know who we need to contact, or as far as the support process goes, what we need to do as far as troubleshooting. So it is very much a collaborative effort as far as the legal team goes, and our digital staff as well. So,
Jeff, what about at Fox?
Yeah, we've got a digital partnership team that works with the local stations and our local content, and we work very closely with the network distribution team on any streaming deal, just to make sure that we're all aligned for Fox's overall priorities.
Suzanne, how about CBS?
Sorry, what was the question specifically?
That was who's in charge of the VM-VPD relationship there? Is it a team? Is it an individual?
Yeah, I mean, as part of the larger Viacom, previously it was CBS Interactive's BD team. CBS Interactive sort of got folded into the larger Viacom CBS, and so now it's part of the streaming team, which includes the Pluto team and HQ, Sports HQ, ET Live, all of that.
And John, at KSL, does this fall on your desk, or is it a team?
I'm definitely involved, but it's similar to some of the other people saying it's a committee, and legal's definitely involved. But so far, we've resisted the MVPD's deals, especially when it comes to our news content. We have secured deals with View It and Weather Channel for some of our niche content, like our ambient TV stream called Utah TV. Mm-hmm. But we want more control over our news content and how users experience it. So far, we're just driving people to download the KSL TV app. But who knows, that may change in the future, but that's where we are today.
I will, if I can just add, I will say that one of our sort of tenets of how we do these deals is that we don't do deals where our VOD clips are aggregated into sort of playlists with other partners' content, because there's a lot of brand risk associated with that. So we license our live stream, and we will license our clips if they live in a CBS News playlist. But we don't license them to sort of a news experience where you might have CBS News next to, I'm not going to name them, but other news organizations that we feel do not sort of reflect the same news values as our brand does. So we are not doing any of those deals.
Completely agree with that. Yeah, last thing we want is some of our investigative journalism to be followed or sandwiched in between some sponsored content from other stations. It just wouldn't put us in a good light.
Yep. And there's a lot of organizations that call themselves news now, and I think we're all aware of who those are, and don't, if they want to carry them on a separate channel, that's fine. But people are conscious of switching channels. They're not conscious, even if there's a slate, again, if they're not watching it and they're just sort of listening to it in the background, it's very dangerous, I think.
We have some good questions coming in from the audience. I'm going to get to those shortly, maybe claw back a few minutes here. But before I move on, I want to ask quickly about smart TV manufacturers as well. I wonder if any of you want to weigh in on the importance of being on that home screen for audience discovery, of just managing that relationship and how important that has become.
I'm happy to weigh in here. I would say very. I go back to my comments earlier on simplicity. If a viewer turns on their TV and sees what they want the moment that they turn it on, and they can click it to watch, they're going to do it. I don't disagree at all with what Suzanne was saying about the importance of the apps, but if you can get on that home screen when the TV turns on, you're going to beat the apps, because why go search for the app? Why go search the EPG? Why have to go find the channel? You literally just click one button and you're into the content you're looking for. And that means that first screen is critical if you can fight and claw your way into it.
Yep, I agree.
I want to take our first audience question here, put this to any of you. The question is, how do you get the younger audience to find you, turn them into regular viewers as they move into 25 to 54 and make money from streaming compared to the traditional business model? It's a heavy question, but I wonder if any of you want to take at least the first part of that, getting that younger audience to find you and habituate them.
I can jump in and take that. So part of our strategy is to build scalable partnerships that expose our app and our content to new viewers, especially younger viewers. I'll give you a few examples. In February 2018, our general manager, Tanya Vea, secured first of its type deal with Real Salt Lake in Major League Soccer. We were the first company, local station, to get digital OTT distribution for a major sport. We had to, of course, geofence it just to our local area. But if you wanted to stream the game, you had to do it in the KSL TV app. That created a huge influx in new users to our app who came in for the sports content, a lot of them much younger, soccer fans and families. So they come in for the sports content, and then they get exposed and used to using the KSL TV app, and news and our entertainment and other content is all available to them. We've replicated that relationship over and over again. We did a similar deal with Utah Valley University, where we stream all of their sports. So we have all of these college students and families coming into our app younger. And now we are doing a huge deal, well, at a local level. We're streaming over 1,500 high school sports games this year across the state of Utah. That's going to generate millions and millions of viewers, and it's going to result in any household with high school age students or sports players in their family. Multiple members of that family are going to download the KSL TV app and able to enable them to watch the games.
John, as you scale that up and you go to more and more, I mean, it's one thing for, to deal with a professional sports team, but it's another as you start scaling into many, many high schools and their games. So how do you ensure kind of baseline quality of the broadcast of the game? Do you have freelancers there with cameras? What are the logistics of managing that?
It is a massive, I mean, it is only a high school sport in the grand scheme of things, especially for those of you who deal with national stuff, but it is a massive undertaking. Nate Dowdle, who's in charge of our KSL sports team, he has just been knee deep in all of the logistics, but we have the resources of the KSL TV team, all the videographers, lots and lots and lots of freelancers. But we treat these high school games as professional quality broadcasts. So it's not like somebody dropping a little GoPro in the middle of the field and walking away. We have announcers and graphics and sponsors, of course, to monetize the whole experience. But it is a massive production undertaking, but it does benefit us financially, and definitely from an audience growth perspective and getting that younger audience used to using our app on a regular basis.
And you find those games in sort of the sub channel inside of the app itself?
Yeah, there's a whole sports section in the KSL TV app, and where you can find everything from major league sports like Real Salt Lake soccer games to the college games like Utah Valley University, and then of course all of our high school and other sports offerings.
Okay, all right. I have another audience question I want to share here. With streaming content, we can see precisely who's following. We can adopt precise strategies with respect to the reference targets or advertisements. For example, in Italy, the ratings of the programs are in percentages. There are references, but not in a precise way. With streaming and on-demand programs, more possibilities open up. What do you think? What do you think? and anyone can take this. I suppose the question here is about the utility of the precision of the form and how that has played to your advantage so far, how you've been able to capitalize on that.
I mean, if it's to that side, I guess from our perspective, like especially with like Soul, like what we mentioned before, seeing like immediately what happens with different programming is more, if it's faster and it allows us to pivot, adjust, and change accordingly at a rate that we never had in the broadcast space. If that's what they're asking with that question, that's how I would take it, and that's been exciting to try. It's been frustrating as well when we know we have something that we think is going to be really good, and then like literally 15 minutes after it airs, you're watching things change. But that's I think it's definitely changing how we approach the channels and programming overall.
Okay.
I would also add, if I can, that I think, it certainly matters what the content is, but it's also about how you make people aware of that content. And it's that if you make a great show, but you're not sort of putting it out there in the world in all the ways that you do, whether it's through newsletters or on-air promotion or promotion through the broadcast or social promotion or tweets or push alerts, and nobody comes, it doesn't necessarily, sometimes it means that maybe the content was great, but the rollout promotional plan wasn't great. And so, I think also looking at things that work and don't work from both is the content, or is it how we put it out into the world in all the ways that we know drive engagement. Because sometimes we've put out stuff that I know is good, but maybe the promotional plan wasn't as strong as it could have been, or maybe it came together at the last minute, and so we weren't able to engage all our partners. We have a whole plan of how we share information with our partners, how we share promotional art with our partners, and all of that. And if you can't get all that done, then that can also affect how something performs.
Well, Suzanne, you've teed up exactly the last major cornerstone I want to be sure to touch on here. We talked about the content proposition, UX, we've talked about quality control, the relationship with the VM VPDs, but then there's the direct marketing itself. So I'd like to just go around to each of you really quickly to have you speak to what have been the most effective marketing channels that you've found so far? What works the best to connect with an audience on streaming? And let's start with you, Steph.
Definitely, you have to use your, across the board as far as the digital platforms that you're on. You need to make sure that you're using those spaces to send out the notifications and whatnot. And I think that one of the confusing things for our stations right now is just what to focus on. So I think that's another thing as far as marketing goes, is you need to be very specific as okay, we're going to focus on these platforms right now. We'll push towards that, and then because there's only so much that your marketing team can do in a given year, so that's again why we're being very strategic on where we're putting our streams. Is we don't want to overwhelm them, but we don't want to saturate it. So once we focus in on one key platform, I think they're able to at least really grab hold of an audience there for that specific platform if it speaks to that audience. So
okay, what about you, Jeff, at Fox?
I'd say there's three. I mean, not one is what we've already mentioned. Anything you can do to get your channel on the first screen of startup, period. That's the biggest channel for marketing. People want easy. So whether you're partnering with the platforms or whether you're paying for it, that's the biggest impact. Two is remember that people are bad at remembering. And so if you're pushing a message for your OTT app or channel, do it on the right platform when they have remote in hand. The number of times I've seen ads for a Roku channel on my mobile phone when I'm really in no position to watch, I'm never going to remember that later. But maybe I'm in a position to watch the stream on that person's app or on their website that I can do on my mobile phone. Just make sure that you're targeting appropriately. And then, the final one for us is I've been surprised by how much people search in Google for where can I stream X. So Google search ads might be a place that you can capture people that are already intent on finding you. You're just helping them find you faster and making the process easier. And we've seen some good success there.
Okay, Suzanne, what about you?
I would definitely agree with what Jeff said about, people don't remember things. Tune in on Wednesday at 8 versus watch now is an entirely different message, right? So we tend not to drive through paid on platforms like Roku and things like that until there's a watch now button, because there's so much to see, and unless it's like must see TV, people might be like, oh, that looks interesting, and they'll click on it now. So that's number one. Number two, I think that whole idea of, the idea of making it easy for consumers to just click once, I would say that that's really important with your partners. So Amazon, Fire, Roku, everybody has a different spec that they need. Everybody has different requirements for their art. And if you can give them exactly what they need, and make it really simple for them to promote you, this isn't paid, because obviously paid is a different animal, but if you can make it as easy as possible for them to promote you, then you're more likely to get all of that, earned media, as I would say, versus the guy who sends the wrong spec and the wrong click, CTA and all of that, and that's always a win if you can get them to promote you without actually eating into your marketing budget.
Okay, John, a quick insight on this?
Yeah, we'll cross promote between our different platforms. So if you watch KSL TV broadcast, we're promoting the apps. If you're on the apps, we're promoting TuneIn to the broadcast. We also leverage out-of-home partnerships. So like I mentioned, the Real Salt Lake partnership. If you go to the stadium, the digital banners everywhere throughout Rio Tinto Stadium has calls to action to download the app. And so while people are watching the game in the stadium, they see, okay, download the app. And then we actually see a lot of people watching the app while they're at the live games. So we do a lot of out-of-home with our partnerships.
Okay, great. And just lastly, I'm just going to claw back a couple of minutes, as I said, for our lost time at the top, and synthesize a couple of audience questions here. Basically, a couple of people are asking here, what's in the future here? How do you see streaming services affecting local broadcast stations in the future? Viewers have countless streaming options available. How's it going to play out in the next few years, given that there most likely isn't room for all to succeed from a viewer bandwidth standpoint? Who's going to win here and why? What do you all think? Let's go around the group with Stephanie to start with.
Man, it's hard to say. I mean, I don't even think the viewer knows what they want yet, to tell you the truth. So I think it's all just it's gonna play out here within the next year or so. But I really feel like all of us on this panel are going towards the right direction as far as the local and the niche. So I think that's definitely something that we're going to keep in the forefront as we plow through all this. But
Jeff, what do you think?
Tough to predict. I would say free and easy are what users are going for. And the platforms that are doing that are definitely going to win in the long run. I don't think that we can have 20 of them, but I think that there's going to be a few that win in that space, at least in the AVOD fast area. That's very different than what's going to happen with the SVOD space, but I think free and easy is the win.
Okay. Suzanne?
I would agree with free and easy, and I would add ubiquitous. So like everywhere you go, you see that. I think that that's really important. And that's not easy or cheap for us because there's so many platforms and you have to develop for all of them and they're all always changing. So I definitely think that's important. I also think putting TV on streaming apps, in my opinion, is not the answer. That's not, we shouldn't just take the broadcast. That's not to say we don't stream Sunday morning on CBS, on the CBSN app. We do. It's an amazing show. And on Sunday we stream it. But the way we deliver news and the feedback we've gotten in all our testing is that our users appreciate a 7-minute interview instead of a 2-minute interview. And that depth, the people who are downloading these apps and who are watching these channels are looking for depth, at least ours, and not opinion and not yelling and not fighting, but information, like real information from real experts. And so that's, at least for us, what we're really leaning into.
Okay, great. And John, the last word on this?
It comes down to content convenience, similar to what a lot of the other panelists said. We use our software like BitCentral, take the whole full broadcast, and if somebody wants to watch it live while it's happening, that's fine, but then it's automatically chopped up into VOD clips that are available to the user. They don't have to go watch the full thing, or we can actually do rack on-demand live broadcast. So if you miss the live news, when you go in the app, it'll start from the beginning, so you're not missing anything. So whatever we can do to make our content more convenient to the audience is a win for both of us.
Okay, great. Well, I'm afraid that is all the time that we have for this discussion. I want to thank my excellent panelists, John Accorino, Suzanne Mai, Steph Rajkowski, and Jeff Zelmer for being here with me today. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Michael.
And now I'd like to introduce Kathy Haley, the publisher and co-founder of TV News Check, for a fireside chat with Raul Cospin, the director of product strategy at Gillette. They're going to be talking about Storytelling 360, reinventing collaborative news production everywhere.
Thank you, Michael. And hello, everyone. Story-centric workflow has been a mantra in news production for nearly a decade, and the pandemic and widespread remote production it triggered have accelerated the need for this approach to producing news. I'm here with an expert on this topic. He's Raul Cospin, Director of Product Strategy for News at Gillette. Raul has played a vital role in Gillette's transformation over the past 2 decades to IT-based, fully integrated newsrooms. He's in charge of revolutionizing Gillette's solutions for news, sports, and fast-paced productions, including those involving AI. It's great to see you, Raul.
Great to see you, Kathy. Thank you for having me.
Oh, it's good to have you. So the title of this session is Storytelling 360. What is that?
Well, actually, to come back to this, I guess the shape of the news industry is changing, and it's clear to everyone that consumption is evolving towards social, digital, OTT, VOD. But there is also the fact that news is also going much faster than before, and there are more news sources, and we don't have those, press conferences well scheduled in advance. And we don't only rely on services, wire services to do the news. We have seen, for instance, some personalities sending tweets that have been so impactful to the world and to the headline. So in other terms, the world of news is running so fast. And that means that traditional TV and radio production are not relevant anymore to the market. And you need to be able to go digital first. You need to get your digital team to be able to take the lead on stories to go to digital first. And going digital also means that there is much more work. We need to prepare narration graphics, captions to be able to offer to your audience videos that you can watch without having to listen to the audio. So let's face it, I mean, the NRCS technologies that we know from the past are not well equipped to address the digital world. And at the same time, the habits are changing, and people are working from home and from the field, and it's not specific to the news industry. All in the industry are having more and more home offices. So why? Well, COVID is certainly a cause for this, but because it's also possible to do it. And we see more platforms also to be delivered for the content to be delivered to, and also more job specialties. And working from home means that you need to pay much more attention on collaboration. And you need to find new ways to collaborate together, to feel like you are in the office together, even though you don't necessarily have those physical contacts. So in other terms, we ask newsrooms to produce more content, more stories, more digital content, better stories, react faster, to be first on digital, and all of this has a lower cost. And storytelling will be an answer to this.
And so Storytelling 360, what does that mean for the user? Can you show us?
Yes, sure. Actually, storytelling is really about putting together at the story level the organization and the production side of things. So You can look at storytelling as a combination of multi-platform NRCS and news production and an enterprise communication system all together in a single solution. The idea is to make all the functionalities that you need and the content available at the story level. So this radically changes the notion of a story. The story is not a radio or TV script anymore, but the story is the place where you work together collaboratively. So the idea is to have everything inside the story. And I mean, you want me to show. So here we go. This is the user interface that we've got. So this is a planning user interface. I'm not going to get into detail. What I want to focus is really storytelling 360. And let's look at that Southeast Asia flood story. The idea here is to have the 4 main components of storytelling. So the first one is about having all the story angles that I need to deliver to different platforms. The second one is really having the collection of media that I need to use and which is relevant to my story. So being wires, being pictures, being audio, being video, PDF documents, you name it. The third aspect is really to be able to manage the different tasks that you need to do part of the story. So who is going to go on the field through the interview, who is going to do the graphics, who is going to do the editing or the digital version and so on. Okay, and what are the deadlines? What is the editorial status? What is the progress of my overall story? And the last aspect is really to have production capabilities like ingest capabilities or the ability to directly edit from the story. And this is going to open here a web-based editor that we have developed with the media bin I was talking about. So altogether, I mean, let's not focus too much on that screen, but altogether, the idea is to have those 4 different aspects in the story: the angles, the content, the project, the tools, and everything which is around how you're going to organize the production of your story and how you are going to collaborate on it.
Interesting. And so you've just been showing us the technology. How does technology need to, what does it need to do to keep up with all the change in news production today?
Well, to increase the collaboration, in some case, to overcome the new constraints of the global pandemic, many newsrooms have adopted communication systems, Teams, Microsoft Teams, Slack, Google, where are part of those solutions. So these become their virtual offices, okay, in which people meet and work together. And this is really related to the pandemic. This was an immediate response to pandemic. And many newsrooms have also adopted Trello because it offers a Kanban view of your production process, which is very convenient for planning and for following up, the production. And in the meantime, those newsrooms, many of them have adopted remote production capabilities. But all of this is not necessarily connected to the main environment, which is usually made of an NRCS and an NPS. So really combining remote production and this virtual office offered by communication systems makes, when you combine those two, you really make that virtual newsroom in which you're going to collaborate together. And this is what really storytelling 360 is about. It really reinvents the definition of what's a newsroom and what a story is. And what's also incredible is this really doesn't only apply to news, it applies also to sports or storytelling in general.
Yeah, I bet it does. Can you talk a little bit about what the cloud, how the cloud is involved in all of this, Raul?
Well, let's say that all of this is possible thanks to cloud-based technologies. I mean, as far as we're concerned, we adopted, technologies like Kubernetes, Docker, but especially web-based technologies. I mean, in our case, we are using mainly Angular for this. But we also develop mobile application, mobile apps that goes with mobile devices. So you get an access to your newsrooms directly from your pocket, from your mobile phone. So really, we can say that cloud is an enabler for that, and cloud will help newsroom to serve their distributed workforces from a central system.
Deloitte is launching Pyramid. You announced it last December, and you're going to be releasing it to the world at NAB in the fall. This is a new production platform that is so completely different from what the company offered in the past that the company changed its name to signal the magnitude of this software change from Deloitte Digital Media Systems to Deloitte, changed your logo. Can you talk a little bit about the fundamentals of the technology because this has been such a big change for Deloitte?
Yes, you're right. Actually, to launch Pyramid, this means a big transformation for the company. And actually, we went back to private. We were listed on the stock exchange, and we went delisted. The reason is we wanted to go in a new investment cycle and have what we call internally a surge in the R&D. And so we are developing all our products on three pillars, which are mobility, agility, and flexibility. And really, what we are trying to bring, part of Pyramid, is first of all agility, leveraging on cloud-based technology to operate with shorter release cycles, ease the operation process, have transparent upgrades, leverage on the elasticity of the cloud, and really adapt to the business need in general, but also to lower the overall TCO. And if you look at the Deloitte Pyramid client, as you've seen it, it's fully web-based and to provide full mobility. So the idea is you can work from anywhere with no compromise on functionalities. And also there is a very strong focus on the user experience. So we expect now more and more the user experience to be inspired from systems like Trello, like Facebook, like Teams. Those are the kind of systems that are really setting the usability standards of today. So we also have this strong focus on collaboration with Story 360 at the core. And obviously, the ambition is to really bring the digital team on board and have the ability to go digital first. So in other terms, Deloitte is going through a company transformation, going from a traditional license-based business to full SaaS business. And the focus is not anymore on the product, but the focus is on customer success. And that really radically changes the way we design, we develop our product, but also the relationship that we have with our customers.
Sounds like it's probably very exciting within the company. Well, I know we're running out of time. Tell us just a little bit about AI in Pyramid and story-centric or storytelling 360.
Yes, sure. Actually, we are implementing AI all over in Deloitte Pyramid, and this is really to assist the editorial team and the editing team to do their everyday tasks. So going from the traditional, this is recent, but indexing technologies, face recognition, speech recognition, and so on, in order to, for instance, automate the caption creation, but we have also user interface to modify captions and to translate captions and such kind of things. So there are productivity tools related to artificial intelligence. But the main focus for us for now is based on new technologies to better recommend content. So the idea is I'm writing a story and I want to be recommended automatically with some content that is really relevant to my story. And before we were doing that based on keywords and what we call natural language processing and so on. But the technology has evolved, and now we are coming to a point in which we have semantic representation of stories available using new transfer learning technologies. And this is really a breakthrough. This is exactly for a journalist like doing 40 different searches and classify thousands of results into topics, into angles. And then, that would take you effectively 45 minutes, 1 hour to do, but now you do it in less than 1 second. That's the beauty of it.
That's really interesting. So we're out of time, Raul, sadly. I want to thank Raul Cospin, Director of Product Strategy for News at Deloitte, for joining me on this fireside chat. See you again, I'm sure, in October at NAB, Raul. Thanks, everybody, for joining us.
And enjoy the rest of the conference. Thank you so much.
Yes, there's still a lot more conference left to go. Thanks, Raul. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
And thank you, Kathy and Raul. We're going to take a brief break and be back with you for our next panel on best practices for generating revenue in just a few minutes. Welcome back, everyone. Our next panel discussion is best practices for generating revenue. And we have the perfect person to shepherd that conversation in Blake Sabatinelli. Blake is the former CEO of EW Scripps' Newsy, and now he is the COO of Atmosphere.tv. And he will introduce you to his excellent panel. Welcome, Blake.
Thanks, Michael. Thanks for having me. Excited for the conversation that we're going to have today, and looking forward to questions from the audience as we move forward. Joining me today, we have Maggie Drake from my old stomping grounds at EW Scripps. She's the Senior Director of OTT Revenue over there. Joe Weir, Senior Vice President of Digital at Cox Media Group. Roma Kojima, the Senior Director of Customer Success and Data Operations at CBC. Roma, you have the most difficult job title out of everyone to make sure that I get right. And Christian Davino, the Vice President of Addressable and Strategy at Disney's Advertising Sales Local. Yours is equally challenging. So today, if you haven't read the agenda, we're talking about how we're going to monetize, or how you can monetize news content, and how this evolving world that we're sitting in is changing every single day for all of us. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and hop in and talk a little bit about the sales process. This will be a question for all of you, and I guess I'll start with Maggie on this. And it's, how crucial are your streaming efforts within Scripps for your linear sales operations? And is streaming still primarily a digital product, the old broadcast dollars and digital dimes, or is this now a meaningful part of your business?
So it's kind of interesting because it depends on who you ask as far as what, if it's digital or if it's linear, right? But to go back to where you started with your question, I'm finding it to be more and more crucial. Of course, I'm over OTT, so I find it very crucial. But as far as just in conversations, there's more and more folks gravitating towards it. As far as the company, I think we're starting to see a little bit more of a shift. I had 2 emails this week alone talking about buyers pulling linear, right? Pulling linear dollars and moving it all to OTT or all to streaming. And as far as looking at the digital versus linear, we used to see, and in the early days of OTT, we saw that it was primarily digital. And you would talk to a linear buyer and they would say, oh, we don't handle that. The digital team handles that. And they really didn't want to have anything to do with it. I've seen in the past 3 years, especially, that the majority of the larger agencies and the majority of the more progressive buyers are shifting it into, it is more of a linear type approach. They're looking at it as it's video, it's TV. They're looking at a holistic video approach opposed to a broadcast or a streaming or, pre-roll. It's kind of all being lumped together into video.
Gotcha, that makes sense. And Christian, for you, is it impressions, or are you guys looking at it differently at Disney?
No, I think, just to kind of follow up with Maggie's point, it's about video and it's also just about the audiences. So, for Disney, streaming is incredibly critical to linear sales, but the reverse of that is also just as true. And I feel like that gets missed in this binary world of pitting these two things, sometimes against each other. They're really part of an ecosystem for us, and one isn't better or worse. One isn't old and new or antiquated and the future. One is obviously older and one is obviously newer, but they do work in concert, and they're both vital because they represent the way that our consumers and our viewers are accessing our content. And that, of course, in turn, has to be reflective with how we talk to the ad community. You know, a linear only strategy at Disney, you know, isn't going to be as effective in reaching a younger set of viewers. And a streaming only strategy is going to, you know, you're going to miss out on television viewers who are tuning in for live news, specials, and sports. So really, these things all work in concert, and that's the narrative that we're out there in the marketplace talking about, making sure that we're reinforcing the value of working together versus you know, treating them as independent things in the media world.
Totally makes sense. Joe, I'm gonna come to you with the same question. How are you guys looking at this at Cox?
You know, I think to bounce off your question, it's critical because it's opportunistic, and it's opportunistic in the way that audiences are continually to grab in. You know, when we came out of a pandemic, and as we've started to come out of such a heavy news cycle, you start to see that there's this increased sampling. So, you know, in this business, for, you know, since its existence, it's always been that ad dollars always follow eyeballs. So when that's happening, it becomes opportunistic to the organization because that's what consumers are doing, and then we start to see those convergence of ad dollars together with broadcast and with digital in a kind of a CTV environment. So critical and opportunistic is really how we're looking at it.
Gotcha. And can I ask you a follow-up question? Are you at Cox, are you guys looking at this from a, you know, it's a single measurement standard, or is this, you know, kind of a piece together sales strategy where you have one set of impressions and one measurement standard and another set of impressions and another measurement standard?
Yeah, I think it's a great question because we look at it to see today buyers are buying it differently, right? So they're buying a linear product one way and then a digital product in a different way. But those continue to converge at an incredibly rapid pace. So, you know, there's not an article, there's not another viewpoint that we don't look at every other month about how these things come together. So when you think about, if you say that digital and broadcast are what I would say is the biggest combination, 1-2 combination that exists in media today, and then you start to, within those two, find areas of convergence. So they start to overlap in certain areas, which is what they're doing. Then I think what we will start to see is this common metric of measurement. They will probably start to see maybe some ideation and innovation on common delivery and how they converge together. I think that in a world where everyone's grappling for land space on this and what that commonality will be, I still think we're a couple of years for where it all comes together. I would say this, the industry is going to be both for broadcast and for digital. When we look at CTV, our ability to accelerate that convergence and come together is going to make it more powerful. It's going to make us as broadcasters more powerful in a way to go out there and command the viewership and to get ad dollars up against that.
Perfect. Roma, kind of moving over to you. You sit in a little bit different position to the rest of our panelists. A, because you're sitting, you know, as our friendly neighbor to the north, and B, you have both advertising supported VOD and you have subscriber VOD. Can you tell me how these two different revenue streams like to work in concert and how you guys leverage them to make one better than the other?
Sure thing. And to sort of answer the question, let me give you a little bit of context about where I do sit. So the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation, CBC, the OTT service that I represent, or that we represent here at the CBC, is called Cbc Gem, and that brings together not only the AVOD SVOD hybrid, which is how we launched when we launched it in this way in 2017, but it also has VOD and live streaming, as well as live streaming video channels. So it's always been this sort of package service that we serve Canadian audiences with, and the spread of content goes across news and entertainment, factual, documentary, children's content, sports, all that type of stuff. So the model's always been this sort of blend. And from a sort of sales perspective, there's two elements to it. One of them is obviously, because we treat members as members. Premium is a feature within that membership. So your premium features sort of get you ad-free VOD and that type of thing, and a little bit of extra sort of streaming content with our premium news channel. However, our membership strategy is one strategy, and therefore, when you are consuming this content in an ad-supported way, the advertising that is sort of served to you, we do treat that as sort of digital advertising. From a sales perspective, though, what we are starting to see is that at least in this market, the budgets are starting to get more combined. I think they were kept separate for quite some time, and you kind of have to follow not only Joe, to your point, the audience consumption, but also what Maggie and Christian were saying. Sort of, you also have to follow how the buyer budgets are flowing. And so, we're not the only publishers that I think are doing this, but you're trying to offer as much option as you can. So you can keep it separate where you want to, and there are products that sort of serve those separated budgets and sort of focus on OTT impressions as digital. And then more and more, we're starting to see this sort of combining either happen from an agency standpoint or client direct, and asking for that kind of bundling. So it's sort of up to us to offer those options. And then, the big trend within that is, I think it really got a boost in 2020, as we all saw, around the connected TV platforms in particular. So there's the combo digital and broadcast, then there's sort of premium video within digital, and now connected TV seems to be the real sort of hotness from that perspective.
Love the hotness. A follow-up question there. As we talk about convergence, there's convergence of how we're delivering and what we're delivering, but there's also convergence happening within the agency ecosystems. Roma, I'll start with you. Are you starting to see a significant amount of convergence of buying desks from digital, video, CTV, and linear, or do you still think that's a little bit further out? And then obviously anyone here also on the panel can answer that too.
Yeah, sure. So we are starting to see that convergence for sure. And I think the element for us that we're learning too is that the clients also are more focused on the entertainment, the lifestyle, the sports, that type of content. So it's also about being able to offer against the genres and then the form factor that the clients want, meet those needs. So again, it's about offering that option and that choice, and then being able to place those impressions, as close to where the clients are asking as possible. It does obviously get a little more complex when we combine, especially in live, the news and then the entertainment, factual, et cetera, content. So really, that's where it's the convergence at the platform level and the buyer type, but then there's also the type of content that the adjacency is landed with.
Perfect.
Yeah, I could just add one thing to that. I think that going back to the question about CTV versus linear versus digital, that definitely navigating that within the agency world, I think is still an evolving thing. But I think where we've seen a lot of success, at least from my vantage point, which I'm sure is true across the market, is really when we can point to the incrementality that you get across those platforms, so that becomes sort of the common denominator when you're talking to a buyer who is authorized to buy, conventional local linear or linear period versus national broadcast versus digital video versus a team that's assembled to only activate on CTV. To the extent that we've been able to speak about that more holistically and point to the incrementality that a brand or a marketer gets when you tie these screens together, that's been really, really useful and really well received from the work that we've seen.
Right. And if I could even add to that, at the local level, we're seeing that because we have to make recommendations a lot of times within tighter budgets, right? And folks are really coming to our team and they're saying, hey, we know, you have TV, you have digital, you have OTT, or you have streaming CTV. Where do I need to be? Where should I put my money? And a lot of times we're being faced with that question, like, where should I? Like, they think it's one. And to that point, Christian, it really isn't one. It's kind of how and getting that incremental. So we have to really work very hard at a local level. Sometimes it's, like I said, even harder because you're working with a tighter budget and trying to make sure that you're hitting all of those folks and you're using it and getting the incremental reach. So it's really a lot of an education point, even within the sales teams, And then you're educating the local agencies as well as sometimes the larger agencies.
Perfect. Bob, anything extra to add on that one? Not Bob, Joe, I apologize.
I'm sorry, you can call me Bob.
I call you. All right.
I think there's a couple of things. I thought Christian brought up a really good point about the incrementality of what's really going on. So think about what we're seeing from, say, even last year to this year. When you look at what advertisers are doing, we're starting to see them do a couple of different things. So they're using OTT and TV as a way to do deeper targeting, right? So it's a part of this platform is its ability, because it's enriched by data around users. So deeper targeting, you start to see flexibility that they can, in terms of running messaging, running certain messaging up against certain different targets. So you see its ability to move quickly with video, all right, that has some really unique features that I think agencies are really leaning into, local buyers are leaning into. Even when we look at how we manage our inventory from indirect channels, the types of things that they're bringing to us and looking for. So that's what is really unique about this platform is its ability to really innovate on creative ad messaging. And that's what makes, I think, a really strong combination between these two, from a broadcast, from a digital. When they come together, you have these things that empower each other for brands to get stronger.
And Joe, it's a great segue into the innovation and customization of ad elements that exist on the CTV ecosystem. Christian, Hulu has kind of been early in the game here as far as delivering customizable ads or interactive ads, broadly across the entire platform. How important to your advertisers is that customization, and do you see, significant interaction with those ads as a whole?
Yeah, it's a great question, and you're right. Hulu has really pioneered in many ways, innovation and just ad experiences that feel and look different, even from a consumer standpoint. I mean, I've witnessed that as a heavy streamer, heavy linear television viewer. It's really apparent to me who's doing it, who I think is doing it well as just a consumer. So consumer first ad experiences is really the way that we're trying to shift the narrative inside the company. And it's not really so much of a shift. I mean, it's really just blending what we know from the legacy Hulu side of the business, and now having that being insulated by the broader Disney company and trying to adopt those best practices. But fundamentally, these experiences and these products should be, two really easy to understand things. One, they should be less disruptive, and to the viewer, which I think makes a lot of sense. And in theory, they should be, to a degree, a bit more personalized and relevant. I know that that's not really groundbreaking as like a litmus test of what good advertising should be, but we all know, that that's just not always the way that it shakes out. So a great example of a product that we released last year in 2020 on Hulu specifically is called Gateway Go. And Gateway Go really marries, for lack of a better way to describe it, a traditional TV spot with the interactivity that you can, experience in a living room environment made possible by second screen technologies. And what I mean by that is, you're watching in your living room, the ad comes up, and then let's say you've got a QR code that prompts you. That QR code, there's two things about that experience. One, it's going to be a bit more personalized. Blake is a registered Hulu user. You've opted in to share your phone number and your Hulu email address. So it's going to say, hey, Blake, do you want us to send this to your cell phone as a text, as a push notification, or do you want us to follow up with you on email? So that's already a new layer of personalization. And for the advertiser, for example, we did a really great program with Sweetgreen, which, for folks on the phone who may not be as familiar, they operate in about 10 states, I want to say, something in the neighborhood of 10 states, and they have over 100 locations. killer salads, guacamole, greens is just a good little plug there. But as you're watching, right, these are geo-specific, messages that are being sent to you. I live in New York. There are like 4 Sweetgreens around me, and the prompt is, hey, $10 off your next order. What's really great about that is, I can scan that QR code with my phone. I can click a button to have that offer sent directly to my cell phone or to my email. And it does, carry some weight in terms of, being able to then convert that offer in store or through a delivery service. So those types of experiences for brands and for our marketing partners have really been a bit of a game changer when you think about taking the living room experience or taking a mobile experience and really pulling that customer further down the marketing funnel. So we've seen great success again with Sweetgreen, which is near and dear to my heart because I am a fan of their products. But we've done a number of other ones. Smile Direct Club is a D2C brand that had a similar offering where you could navigate to get more information about, how to look into improving your smile, as they say. So those are the kinds of things that we're exploring, and it's just one example parked on the Hulu side with the Gateway Go product.
Wonderful, and I'm glad you brought up QR codes because that was actually going to be my pop quiz for this panel. It's COVID has normalized the use of QR codes, something that I think all of us had at some point in time were thankful were dead. They've gone away and we never wanted to deal with them ever again. But they've become mainstream as a result of not having a menu at a restaurant or making sure that we kept our distance. Just kind of going around the horn here, Maggie, are you seeing more requests from advertisers to have QR codes embedded in their ads?
We've definitely had an uptick, and to your point, yes. I mean, QR codes. I remember the first time I went out to eat after COVID, and I was like, "Oh wow, we're still doing this." So yes, but we've had some. What we have seen though, and using even kind of back to Christian's point about the dynamic creative and in the living room experience, if you will. We've seen when we've run dynamic or we've done any kind of specialized creative, not because we do focus primarily on CTV. So we don't see a lot of engagement necessarily with that TV, but to that second screen point, Christian, we're seeing that there's more organic. We're seeing a lot better uptick in the attribution aspect of it. So, so while yes, we are starting to get more interest in QR code and primarily it's being embedded into I wouldn't say it's a huge increase, but it is some, and primarily where it makes sense to that point where there's an offer, right? There has to be something in the creative, there has to be something in it for the user to make them want to grab their phone and scan that code, right? If it's just for more information, they're probably going to Google it. But if it is $10 off, I would scan it for $10 off. So yes, definitely.
Joe, are you guys seeing the same thing at Cox?
Yeah, we see an uptick in QRs overall. It's still a small percentage, but I'll give you an example. We saw more adoption of it when we were coming into the Memorial Day holiday. So I think when you look at seasonality and brands, some urgency that a brand is trying to give to a consumer to engage with their product, then we're seeing some usage of QR codes. But overall, Blake, it's still just a small percentage of our overall totality of our campaigns.
I think they stand out more though. I think from the user side and even from a personal approach, when I see something like that in there, I lean and go, who is this? What is this? And some of that could tie back to my industry. But I think as a whole, that's feedback I've gotten from, from a lot of different folks that I've talked to about it.
One thing too, we're all on the revenue and sales side of it. So we bring a little bit of bias to these types of products. Like in everything I mentioned is why I personally think it's really cool when we get to talk to clients. But the flip side, and really like from a broader Disney point of view, which I do think cuts across really any publisher, any entity, is that these things do put that consumer first in terms of it's an experience that is not as disruptive and that has a bit of utility built into that ad break. And I do think that has to be part of the North Star as these types of products continue to be added to our product offerings.
Sure. Roma, you guys up in Canada have always been a few years ahead of us when it comes to, transactional technology. First, you guys had, chips on your cards, and you would show up with a mag strip and people would look like you're crazy. Is this all old hat up in Canada, or are you guys seeing the same wave that we are down here?
You forgot to mention, though, the most important thing is the bags of milk. Just saying, putting it out there. I think we're seeing it grow similar to what everyone has said so far, sort of commensurate with consumption. It's tough to say because, to Christian's point, like our antennas are up a little bit differently. So you notice it in out of home, you notice it sort of as a consumer as well. What struck me though, and this isn't exactly specific to QR codes, but I think just the tenor of the advertising and the types of advertisers that did emerge over the last little while, these are the pure plays, right? These are the people that built direct to consumer models, and they suddenly took off or they scaled them very quickly. So the other thing we did notice is that change from sort of not just from the type of advertiser, but also going from like there's a good amount of brand sell, but we're also seeing that shift toward sort of that performance and again offer driven type of creative and things like that. And then adding to that now, playing with different elements in the form factor itself. So what works on a connected TV or that larger screen, as opposed to when it's on your phone. So these are, I think the trends. It'll be interesting to have this conversation like a year from now and seeing what sticks versus what people are trying, because, when we talked about this a few months ago, the behaviors were all net new. No one knew how any of us was going to behave and sort of live this quarantine life. So it'll be interesting to look back on this and see what does stick around and what ticks. I just wanted to, if you don't mind, Blake, I want to just sort of also speak about the way we can leverage these types of learnings on the back end. So one of the things that we've been able to do is also look at from an audience growth perspective, or even a premium growth perspective. So our SVOD layer, being able to also tie the data and the consumption data back when we're thinking about if we are, encouraging certain high engagement segments to upsell, for example, we're also able for our own purposes to tie that back, for example, set ARPU thresholds. So we won't necessarily ask you if Maggie, for example, is a highly engaged viewer, but if she is, or that viewer is generating a higher ARPU than, let's say, yourself, we might hit you up with a premium offer even for our own services, and sort of leave Maggie alone because, that's just going fine. We're not gonna change anything there. So we're also starting to be able to really not only use these and drive these more internally focused conversations and conversion campaigns, and then look at how we could scale those as well. So that's another interesting sort of build from our perspective.
It's like you guys prepped with me here because we have all these wonderful segues into different parts and different topics, and it's amazing. Before I segue into technology, which Maggie, you're going to have the first cut of the question here. You can ask us questions, by the way, and we will answer them. We're very nice people on this panel. Everyone likes answering questions here. So if you have a question, send it into, I think it's into the chat box, and Michael will manually make sure that it gets in front of me because he's a saint. So like I said, moving over to technology, and Maggie, I know that, in working with you in the past and being, in the ecosystem for so long, attribution here over the last 18 months has really become a big word. Can you talk to me about what you're hearing from advertisers as they're looking to have attribution for their ad buys, and how important that is in your sales cycle and for your clients?
Yes, no, definitely. I did want to make a comment on Roma. I was visualizing, as you were talking about that, I was visualizing like a streaming solution for abandoned shopping carts. I was like, ooh, that would be really cool. So yes, very cool. But so as far as attribution it's a buzzword. I don't think I could go a day without saying or hearing the word. And we're finding it from the local level. It's people want to know, right? People want to know what's working, what isn't working. And I think that's one of the reasons why so many buyers even are gravitating towards OTT. For us, we've been really diligent and dug into attribution across all platforms. So instead of, one product attribution and saying, hey, this product over here is driving this to your website, we've been able to take a more all-encompassing look and see, okay, well, in this market or in this campaign or down to the creative level, this creative is driving XYZ traffic to your website. So we're doing it from an OTT standpoint, as well as we've recently opened it up to do it over a linear standpoint. So we can see and even kind of compare and contrast how, down to the network level, right? The station level or network level, and tell folks what that campaign is doing for them. And that has been a huge game changer for us. We've seen, and it's been interesting because in certain markets, there might be certain ratings and networks, and even our competitors might be, we might be a number 2 and they might be a number 1 in that network. And when we see the linear, we're actually seeing that in some cases our stations are driving more traffic, or maybe even the number 3 station in ratings for that particular campaign or client. So it's really given, it's kind of like a peek behind the curtain, if you will. It's given us a lot of information and data, and I'm a data geek. I'm starting to even talk faster. I can feel it because I get excited about data. But to really know like what's working, what is the best path for your client, and to even break it down and see, well, what is driving the most traffic? So is it because it's a highly targeted campaign and we're able to weed out 80-90% of the waste in this DMA? Is OTT, a better value all the way around, or is linear reaching the broad audience a better value? So it's been quite impactful, and we've just had a lot of lean in. There's a lot of questions around it. There's a lot of interest around it, and it's constantly moving. It's a moving target.
Perfect. Joe, are you guys hearing the same thing in Cox markets as well? Are your advertisers looking to see that same kind of return on ad spend that I think people have got accustomed to from Google CPC campaigns or Facebook ads?
Yeah, absolutely. We've, every single day when we talk to our clients, it's always about ROI. I think the message about what CTV is and connected TV and how we deliver video is so incredibly important to this digital ecosystem. So we look at digital in really kind of 3 ways. So when we talk to our clients, it's about what are the things that we're going to do to help you get noticed. There are things that we can do to help you be found from consumers. And then there are a lot of things we can do to help you convert. I would tell you that because of the nature of what OTT and CTV is, this is video. So it's sight, sound, motion, emotion, but it also adds this next dimension of conversion because it's quick accessibility to take you somewhere to do some type of conversion. So attribution is at the forefront of every single thing that we're always talking about our advertisers, because every single year, the number 1 thing our advertisers tell us about is what is our ROI.
100%. To move a little bit further down the advertising funnel here, if you will, let's talk a little bit about first-party data. I think there's been a big focus on that as there's been privacy changes. We're not going to dive into that. That's too nerdy of a topic, but let's talk about at a high level, what each of you are really doing to make sure that you're making the most of first-party data, and how important that is to, it's not your short-term revenue strategy, but your long-term. Is it a big part of it, or not so much at all? Rome, I'll start with you.
It's a huge focus going forward. So a couple of different elements that we're really focused on right now. One of them is the generation of that first party data. And that has to, because we are, CBC has a digital ecosystem that is audio, video, digital publishing. As we are, and that's one of the major parts of my job, is to focus on the membership and the loyalty and the engagement strategies that generate that first party data, but in a way that is handed over by an audience member in a trusted fashion, right? So we have to make the case, and the strategy really focuses on being able to make the case for each of those microtransactions. So tell us a little bit about you, and we'll remember you, and then you can come back and pick up where you left off, or share this piece of information, and we want to treat it with that value, so that you get something in return, because that has to be the value in the moment, and then also see an overall value in terms of your experience getting better over time, right? It becomes more personalized, it becomes more Roma's CBC as opposed to CBC for everybody. So there's the generation piece, and again, clean data and all of that, managing identities, privacy, and sort of just privacy compliance is a sort of a massive, massive body of work. And then there's, well, what do we do with the data? So there is, how do we combine that? How do we tie a user not only across devices, but across services, manage those journeys, and then allow for the profile that starts with my identity and then continues to become more and more robust. We call it like adding the slashes. So there's all the first party declared data, then there's all the preferences and the declared preferences, the implicit ones, the explicit ones, all of that type of stuff that goes on over time. And, and then being able to tie that to, well, what are the insights that are coming out of that? How do we drive those activations? And those activations could be on the sell side, could be on the buy side, could be in terms of sort of personalization and in-service experience improvements, and then all the way in through measurement and being able to optimize sort of midstream. That could be a mid-campaign, mid whatever activation you're running. And so this is a huge, huge priority for us. Of course, this thing that I said in like the last 30 seconds, as massive amounts of bodies of work and a lot of teams and vendors working together, and alongside our advertising clients and partners as well, because there's also all this interesting work that's kicking up around, well, how do we match data? How do we find, if this is a highly attractive segment, how do we find those people within our owned and operated network? How do we manage that exchange? Do we use a clean room approach? Are we doing something else to really sort of protect the privacy, keep the curtains drawn where they need to be, but be able to place that right message in front of the right set of eyeballs at the right time? So, I mean, there's so much here. I think I'm like Maggie, I'm gonna just keep going faster and faster because this is where I nerd out. But at the end of the day, if publishers, media companies in general aren't working toward a first party data strategy, both from a generation act and then an activation standpoint, it's going to get increasingly hard to stay competitive on top of all the other complexities.
Agreed. And I know Christian and his team have gathered all the first party data because of me being a Hulu subscriber forever and a Disney Plus subscriber and going to the parks and all the fun things. So I'm gonna turn this question to Maggie and Joe. How important is first party data to your long-term monetization strategy? I'll start, Maggie, with you.
Sure. So it's definitely there. Unlike Disney and Hulu, right? We don't have the same pool. We're working with a lot of different networks and so forth, except for with our local news opportunity. So in our local news opportunity, that's definitely it's definitely something that's important to us, and we're constantly looking at that. Even from a website component, but we've also partnered with others. So we've partnered recently. We did partner with Amazon to sell their OTT opportunities, and there is first party data included in some of that. So that's been a nice component to be able to tap into that resource of first party data.
And Blake, just one quick thing that I wanted to add on the Disney front, at least, is that looking back over this last year, the number of campaigns that have used data of any kind to target audiences has increased like 56% year over year, representing like a little bit north of 110% revenue growth in that same time. So I say that because I think, as we're all experiencing, this is a trajectory and a ride we're going to be on for a while, if not, like, this may just become a norm. And then, on the Disney side, we don't actually pull in Disney Plus registration data or parks data, but we have spent a ton of time over the last year building out our proprietary audience graph that allows us to, in a data compliant way, have marketers access. Today, I think it's over 1,000 custom segments. Conservatively, we could say 900 custom segments that really do bring those insights to clients. And to bring it back to local, and thinking about the own stations footprint that Disney, has had under its umbrella for some time, that's a pretty new proposition on the local side, because the one thing that's missing, or the one thing that even for us, we find a bit challenging, is that even when you have all of the data and you've done it in a very data compliant way, and especially when you're talking to a local marketer and you start slicing and dicing that, you still can run into a challenge with scale. So, talking about attribution, talking about data capabilities with the absence of scale is, a bit more pie in the sky than the reality when it comes down to writing that order and fulfilling that order. So just wanted to throw that out there as well as another thing that's sort of in our orbit that we're working to resolve.
Wonderful ad. Joe, so we have an audience question, and Joe, I think you're well equipped to take this one. So to make sure we can get to it, I'm gonna start here. And it's thinking of local advertisers, do sellers of OTT have to fight against the stereotype of broadcast TV, who traditionally bragged about reach and instead educate on targeting? And is there a big learning curve on that?
Yeah, that is a great question. It probably came from someone in my company. So good question. Here's a couple of things. So yeah, I think there's always a learning curve, right? So there's a combination we talked about earlier, this amazing broad reach environment with a linear sales. And then there is obviously broad reach that's happening on connected TV and OTT. But what sits on the other side is enriched by large amounts of data that we just talked about. So large amount of flexibility in terms of targeting that come with that. So there has been, there's an absolute learning curve. There's a learning curve not only internally for broadcasters, there's a learning curve that's happening externally with agencies, with direct clients. We have been selling, we've been selling in this area, for 4 or 5 years. And, we probably did more education last year than we've ever done. We just did a webinar ourselves out to clients. So it's a combination of both. And it doesn't stop because this is an innovative technology-driven platform that will continue to carve new ways of paths. We just talked about QR codes. Think about the training that goes on with all of that when you implement that type of technology into your creative messaging. So I tell you this, broadcasters, agencies, we all have to lean in. Incredibly hard on this area. I think, what was it, last year, Magna Global came out, said that 30% of all TV viewing was done on a connected device. I mean, that is blinking in big lights to us that everyone has to lean in. Sellers, management, leaders, and when we get that, we become experts at what we do.
Perfect. All right, it's time for the lightning round. This will be a tough one to do. I want to come in before Michael gives me the hook. But I'll start with Maggie, and I'm going to be quick here. What are you guys doing at Scripps to create a holistic ecosystem for your viewers that allows you to sell advertising from point A to point Z?
Oh my gosh. Okay, so I will be quick. So I think one of the gentlemen on the last panel said something about being free. I forget, I should have written it down when he quoted, but as far as being able to be accessible, right? We're doing that with our news outlet. So in all of our markets, we have that opportunity for folks who, maybe they're using a lot of AVODs, but they are not using another news source. We're trying to be there for their news source. I think we've done a great job at partnering with a lot of the other SVOD companies and making sure that we're able to get our broadcast on there. And then as far as just overall all-encompassing digital solutions, I think we've done a great job making sure that we have everything, right? I always joke, and I make the joke with the sales teams about our loss leaders, right? Like Walmart. So we have certain things that we don't make any money on, and there's deals we don't make money on. But sometimes you have to do some of those deals in order to get everything. So I think that's what we've done a good job at, is making sure that we can provide holistic solutions and not just what we sell. Does that make sense?
It absolutely does. Christian, same question for you.
Honestly, Maggie, your close, I want to just rip right from that. I thought that was perfect. I would only add, we're hyper focused on bringing more flexibility in all of the solutions that we have, and making it very turnkey in terms of how fluidly you could, go from one product, one platform to the other, and sort of wrapping that all up in one single order, one single storefront. So, that in combination with just a bit more education, which I know was referenced earlier, on things like what is the audience advantage, what's the incremental reach, operationally, how do I do this? All of that really fun stuff is par for the course, with all of that.
Perfect. Joe, go to you, and then Roma, you'll have the final word. It's a big responsibility.
Yeah, it is. Here's the thing. We're a media company, right? So as a media company, you just are doing so much more. And I tell you what, we look at it. We look at how do we leverage more technology? How do we leverage technology to build scale? How does scale help us to build better relationships with clients, right? But that exists not only on the advertising side, it exists also in what we do day in and day out, where we're reaching local, where we're reaching people regionally, or where we're reaching people nationally. So, once years ago, we were isolated, broadcasters were isolated to, deep local reach. That's expanded. Everyone's selling digital, right? Every broadcaster in this country is selling digital. So now they have to think about it regionally and nationally and build scale and technology to go much deeper. So that's the way we think about distribution, technology, scale, and reach.
Perfect. And Roma, big responsibility here. Let's close it out strong.
Oh, that's too much pressure. No. So the way at least I think about it is it starts with the consumer, right? So in terms of building an ecosystem for the consumer, because the ad dollars are going to follow where the consumers go. So the three elements from my perspective are the journeys. So how do we get people from, one service to another, from one platform to another? How seamless are they? Where you add friction, how clean can you make that friction? And how accessible are those journeys as well? Accessibility is a big priority here at the CBC. Then on the back end, the systems all talk to each other. Can you actually have that handoff between, so that the audience experience is seamless? And then the membership and authentication piece, which is, can you have the identity then follow somebody, or their identity be mapped across that the ecosystem? And then going back to kind of what we talked about in the beginning, if the viewer has an ability to go from one end to the other, from one service to the other in their media day, then the products that we build for the clients, for the advertisers, or even to drive our own audience growth, right? The buy-side products will have much more flexibility baked into them, because we sort of know how to follow those eyeballs or those ears around. And so that's kind of the way we look at it, is that let's start with the consumer, the audience, and then if we can take that kind of service blueprint model type of approach with it, really understand how that works, then we can build for all the layers that sit on top of that.
Wonderful. I think our time has come. I see Dad has arrived here back in the chat, which is always good to see my old friend Michael. Joe, Roma, Christian, Maggie, you guys have been absolutely fantastic. Thank you for indulging me with my ridiculous questions. And thank you for everyone out there for listening to us.
And thank you, Blake. Thanks, Roma, Joe, Christian, Maggie. It's good to see all of you again, some of the smartest people in the business, and it was a great discussion, so really appreciate it. We have one more such discussion for you today. That is our roundtable on fast lane technology and the road to boosting audience and revenue. So here to introduce her panel for that discussion once more is TV News Check's publisher and co-founder, Kathy Haley. Kathy?
So I was just saying, I'm so struck by how different the conversation is this year than it was in 2019. When we launched this conference in New York City at the Microsoft Technology Center, the conversation is so much more focused now on the different kinds of content and on the way it's packaged up for the audience. And it's also focused on packaging linear with OTT, which is really exciting. So we wanted to wrap up today with a conversation about technology. Is it causing friction within companies where they're trying to accomplish this goal of expanding their audience and expanding their revenue on OTT? So let me introduce our esteemed speakers. Will Danielson is Senior Vice President of National Sales for the digital division of Nexstar Media Group. Brian Hunt is head of OTT and CTV advertising sales at Sinclair Broadcast Group. Michael Page is vice president of sales for Fox television stations, and Mike Woods is senior vice president of product for Amagi. So I want this to be a conversation as soon as my speakers come up here. I hope my speakers will react to one another's statements, ask one another questions. We have about 30 minutes. Same goes for the audience. If you have any questions, put them in the Q&A feature. Thank you. It gives me one less thing to look at. So, Will, given that you have a background in DTC, advertising sales, and also product development, when you look at today's expanding DTC universe, are there technology challenges that are creating friction for media companies or consumers?
Yes and no. I think when you look at the entirety of the ecosystem, there's kind of three things to really think about. It's the consumer in mind, it's the advertiser in mind, and it's the publisher in mind. There's a lot of overlapping goals within those, and there's also a lot of disparity between that. What might be best for the consumer might not be best for the advertiser or the publisher, or vice versa. I think there's so much great technology out there that really enables audience growth, and then obviously a great advertising experience for the consumer. On the flip side to it is we also have to be cognizant as publishers to create content and opportunities for a great experience for the consumer, and make sure that they're engaging with quality content. And that's really what we're doing at Nexstar, being one of the largest local media companies, if not the largest local media company in the country. And with our push with News Nation, we're really focused on growing our consumer experience in a highly fragmented, direct to consumer facing world.
Is there an example of an area where the technology is right for the consumer, but not the broadcaster or the publisher?
Well, I think a lot of the consumers today don't fully understand how the technology works on the back end. And I think one of the easiest examples to give is when you look at the master control system on the local broadcast level, doesn't necessarily sync with what an OTT ad server system would look like. And those two might not be in concert for the publisher, but on the front end to a consumer, they don't know the difference. They receive the signal regardless of how it's actually being sent out.
That's interesting. Brian, do you have thoughts on this same topic?
Yeah, I mean, for us, I'll put my sort of News On cap on. For those of you that aren't familiar with News On, it's about 300 local NBC, CBS, ABC, and Fox local broadcast newscasts that are either live or on demand. And it's an app that we have that's out there. It's actually gained popularity as many have during COVID. It's actually the #2 news app now on all of Roku. And so with that kind of scale, we have the ability to actually target consumers past just the basic sort of geo and demos. And many of you on this panel are kind of aware of a lot of the significant, industry chatter that almost daily there's an article written about, which is about the cookies going away and sort of its impact and what kind of impact it's going to have on the ability to target these consumers. And so in addition to that, we've had sort of a regulatory environment with CCPA and other sort of consumer data privacy concerns. And, frankly, consumers are increasingly opting out of targeting, and they've got, VPNs, which add a whole nother layer of complexity. However, my sort of purview with this is that, if I put just my CTV lens on and filter on, we've really never had cookies in a connected TV environment sort of to begin with, right? And so there's what we're hearing is there's sort of this new currency that is taking shape, and there's a couple players out there. LiveRamp is one of them with the Ramp IDs and this sort of 2.0 identifier that a lot of larger media companies have jumped on. And I think what you're going to see is the industry is going to sort of coalesce around ways that they can target the consumer in a regulatory compliant and consumer friendly way going forward.
So programmatic advertising is a significant part of your business then, Brian?
Yeah, it is exactly. And when you look at the way that the supply side platform, the exchanges work, many of them allow for levels of targeting, right? So you can buy, for example, through a live, if you're live ramp enabled, or in the future, if you're, ID 2.0, if there are certain identifiers, you can actually buy our viewers that match that criteria through the SSP, through the exchanges. So there's already a lot of work sort of going on in the industry behind the scenes to enable this targeting. I will tell you, it's complex and it's not easy, but certainly, there's a lot of thought that's gone into, how do we allow some level of targeting in sort of this compliant manner.
Yeah, interesting. Michael Page, tell us your experience at Fox television stations. Are you hitting technology friction roadblocks?
Oh yeah, lots of friction, lots of roadblocks. I think what both Will and Brian said, I think is true, is that there's the consumer element, there's the advertiser element, and there's the publisher element. With us and our news, we've kind of got two prongs here. We've got News Now, which is our kind of live event coverage news stream that I think Jeff Zummer probably mentioned before. And then we have our 17 stations across the country that are kicking out a tremendous amount of Fox, because we have the morning and we just produce so much news. And, as a consumer, you're now able with us to go on to Tubi and watch the news. And Tubi being owned by Fox, and our purchase of that last March, gives us a great opportunity. We're actually seeing some really promising signs of local news being watched on Tubi. So that's one system. Then we've got Fox Now, which is our old MVPD authentication network, which our newscasts are all on that as well. And then you've got our live stream, which is not necessarily OTT connected TV, but significant amount of people coming through that point of view, and they all have different ad serving systems. So, what we're doing is, our OTT product called Flex is we're now going to be, and we're in the process of doing this today, is putting everything through Flex to match that 110 million household graph, so we can do the targeting that Brian was talking about, and really be able to sell a rich story about our live news audiences, just like we're doing with our other connected TV OTT products. So, but yeah, right now we're still dealing with Google Ad Manager, a freewheel, and then our own ad serving through Flex. So it's kind of a mix of things that we hope to simplify, and we're working on, really diligently to make sure that, within the next 6 months, we're able to sell one comprehensive, OTT ad package that includes our news broadcasts in a way that give you the richness and targeting data that you don't have right now. So
is Flex what they used to call a private exchange in programmatic? Is that what that is?
Yeah, Flex is our custom built product that takes both our own inventory that we have in OTT connected TV, Tubi being a piece of that, and then we're partnered up with lots of other publishers out there. So it really is audience extension that our sales teams go out to market with, and we launched last year. Been very successful getting that out the door. I think Brian, they have Compulse, and Will's team. I think I'm not sure what the product has at Nexstar, but Flex has been a real successful product for us. Getting the Tubi audience, and then now our Tubi news audience is in there, is kind of the next phase of that. So.
Very interesting. I want to ask Mike Woods, since you're from Amagi, which is a technology company delivering OTT services to vast platforms and also serving ads. How are you reacting to these technology challenges that Brian and Will and Michael are talking about? And what are you hearing from your customers around the world about their challenges?
It's great. It's great to join you and be part of the panel today and talk with everyone here. From the Amagi side, we have a certain vantage point that Amagi in a lot of ways is the tech platform that powers streaming TV, and we bring channels across the board. From always think of it from left to right, from the content creation side, where content owners are able to bring content in, or bring, even if they have existing channels in, we can create channels out of that content. We can then deliver those channels broadly out to video services wherever they need to go. We've got the ad tech that does server-side dynamic ad insertion to insert ads into those channels as viewers watch them. And we've got a monetization service that we call Ads Plus that helps our clients on both sides of that sell the inventory in their channels. And across that, Amagi has really grown over the past several years. We're powering something over 1,000 streaming TV channels today, and work with a lot of the folks actually on the panel here. So it's great to reconnect and talk with everyone. As we've been working across the space, there are a lot of challenges, and I'll pull back from the micro into some of the bigger kind of picture stuff out there. The things that we're doing today are, I start breaking it down like this. All TV today is streaming. And there is certain, of course, cable is still out there, over-the-air broadcast is still out there. These are still big businesses with lots of space left to go. But increasingly, we see the whole business shifting into streaming. And the fast channel space, where we see this really kind of hot flare in the sector and a lot of focus today, is this merger between old school broadcast, traditional cable, and streaming to TV today. And it's this fusion point, and it lives in this a little bit of a weird, awkward zone for everyone, for the consumer, for the broadcaster, for the tech providers. That it's this cross-up, mash-up fusion between television and digital. And as you go out into the ad markets, it's still not clear. And this is one of those big things that's gonna evolve over the next bit and get sorted out. But is the decision of, is this digital? Is this traditional television? What are these ads? What are these formats? How do we think about them? How do we charge for them? What are the CPMs? What is the value out there, right? And so these are a lot of the struggles that we're seeing in the space today. Is from the consumer side, these services are new. People kind of see them today on their TV set. You buy a Samsung TV, you plug it into the internet, and you immediately have 200, 250 streaming TV channels for free. I mean, it's amazing, which is a replacement for the cable package. So for the viewer, it kind of looks like television. And then for the broadcaster, they're kind of patching in. We're figuring out, we're patching in, we're creating channels. It kind of feels like television. We're doing ad breaks, content plays, ad break hits, content plays again, very television-like, but the underpinning tech is all digital. And so being able to get in and work with this and see the evolution of this now, what are the levers that we can pull? We don't have to be TV anymore. We can do really cool things with digital. And this is the space that I think is a lot of opportunities. So there's challenges across the board from the viewer. What is this? What is it not? And evolution in the streaming TV service side. For the broadcasters, there's a big shift from thinking about things in the traditional cable and broadcast days into streaming. From advertisers and ad revenue, is this digital? Is this television? What's the value? How do we price it? How do we target it? These are all things that they're being grappled with in big ways today.
I've been impressed by the convergence people are talking about in this event today. Just with the advertising being packaged, I'm impressed that the industry has progressed this much. Even though I'm not sure the agencies are completely there. But I wanted to ask about going live. And this, anybody can answer this. Brian, Will, Michael, Mike. Suzanne Mai talked about how CBS's local station was able to cover the George Floyd murder and then the trial, and how interesting that was to be able to let viewers switch from the CBSN national feed, global feed, to the local feed. Does that sort of thing, are you, to the broadcasters on the panel, Brian, Will, and Michael, are you going live on your channels at any point, or is it still mostly you're kind of replaying what was on, not the whole broadcast, but a package that was already on TV? And if you go live, are you hitting any technology issues that Mike Woods can talk about?
So I'll dive
go ahead, Will.
Yeah. So with News Nation being our cable news channel, and what we're doing is rolling up a lot of the feeds that we're getting across the country. It really allows us to have that kind of dynamic ability to bring the local feed from KTLA to kind of a national audience, and vice versa. If something's happening across the country in New York and KTLA can take it live in an instant, we've really made it a focus to have the majority of our top markets to have a kind of a 24/7 digital news channel that enables us to have a lot of flexibility. I think there's definitely challenges with that, but I think there's challenges anytime you have to go live in an instant and talk about fast breaking news. I think that's something to always be cognizant of. But for the most part, things go relatively smooth, and the consumer doesn't really see what happens behind the scenes, but it tends to work itself out.
Interesting. That's great. So you can go live, and the technology is not holding you back then.
No, it's the way I look at it is broadcast and digital are universally one and the same to the consumer in terms of how they're getting that experience. How we kind of work it in the master control center and how we work it with the individual stations. It's kind of the secret sauce that Mike, Brian, and I all have to deal with on the other side of the business.
Yeah, master control came up earlier in this conversation. Brian, do you have any thoughts about this?
Yeah, I mean, we kind of have the same type of product. We've got about 300 different stations coming in live, and we it's usually just for a newscast, but we have the ability to stay live or go live with a particular, if there's a breaking news event. But what's really sort of interesting was that we've seen over the last several years with News On is when there's a breaking event in a market, let's say it's a hurricane or particularly the weather events, but even you've seen some of the civil unrest, the viewership will just spike really consistently with that. And it's really it's kind of what you would think, but it's really interesting. And that goes to show that there's consumers out there that they're actually now beginning to seek out the connected TV apps of their local, newscasts where they're used to kind of finding these news apps. And that's actually really sort of exciting because that's, that shows sort of a loyalty of viewership there.
That's an interesting point. It's interesting to see what will happen with something like News On when you have an event. My business partner, Harry Jessel, watched the coverage of the Orlando mass shooting several years ago. He was living in New York and he was watching Orlando stations on News On. Not to plug News On, but because he knew the local stations would have the better placement. They would have their crews in the better spots. So it's interesting to see if that will evolve. Michael Page, any thoughts on going live and
I mean, we do it a lot in the Chauvin trial because our Minneapolis station did a terrific job of going live and doing that in multiple ways. On their Diginet, on Tubi, on their live stream. From an advertising perspective, there's actually those types of things are not really ad rich environments. When we go live, you don't really, you're not doing anything from a revenue perspective, but you're building that audience there in a way that, and all of our stations, you can go to Tubi any night of the week and watch all of our live news, across the country on the 17 stations, plus News Now is going all the time. So they're consistently doing that. I think, the dynamic ad insertion and things like that in standard newscasts, I think that's where technology has really improved a lot. So you eliminated the latency and some of the things that you used to see with being able to insert ads like 5 or 6 years ago. So, that's consistently been something that I think continues to improve compared to where we were, a few years ago, for sure.
That's interesting. Mike Woods, thoughts here from the cloud native provider?
I have a ton, and when we talk about streaming, the big drivers we're kind of in a V1, almost a beta of streaming TV today, and where we're seeing this get pushed forward, and the next round of the tech that's coming out is really transitioning a bunch of these services, a bunch of these tools into the cloud successfully. And this is one of the things that Amagi has really pioneered and done a great job of rolling out to clients. And that's taking these abilities in the cloud frees you up, and it does a few things. The next round of streaming is sports, news, and live events. These are the powers that are going to push forward and really bring things out. And I love that we're diving into them. From the live side, we have a whole live suite that lets you operate out of the cloud with full master control, your full capabilities that you expect out of traditional broadcast studios, but do it remotely wherever you are. Be using it right out of the cloud with our server-side dynamic ad insertion system that we call Thunderstorm. We pioneered and really pushed forward the tech that allows us to frame accurately, seamlessly insert ads into live streams at massive scale. A couple of years ago, a story came out about the Super Bowl and how challenging it was to operate at a couple million viewers. We operated a couple of million viewers day in and day out, almost every day, and certainly any meaningful live event pushes us well above those numbers now. And it's kind of, it's that tech story, right? What was amazing a couple of years ago is now like de rigueur. But being able to bring that tech and make it available to our partners who are out in the field covering these events, who are bringing up live streams on the fly, can mesh them easily into their apps, their video services, deliver those streams, and then tie them in with real-time ad triggers, real-time ad insertion that allows you to monetize these events effectively on the fly, on the go. And that's the kind of thing that we're seeing that I think will really truly push forward that kind of V1, V2 of streaming TV, which is really focused around sports, news, and live events. All the things that are pre-recorded video, there's a certain amount of, yes, I love just laying back and being spoon-fed shows, but if it's pre-recorded, I can go search it down and find it myself. But these are things that I can't do, and they're the power for the streaming channels. And I love what News On does. It's a great service. Everyone should check it out. But also into local news and local broadcasters. This is new life in a lot of these companies and a new outlook for them that may have been a little bit cloudier even a couple of years ago. The future may have looked a little bit more grim to a lot of the local broadcasters, broadcast businesses, and seeing the surge in this, the ability to get on the ground in live with local events and present those effectively to viewers that care about them is really key to pushing this whole ecosystem forward.
So just to make sure I understood, Mike, you're saying now that if a broadcaster should go live with a breaking news event on their stream, they don't have to just give up all the revenue because the ads weren't sold for that.
That's right.
You can they could turn on their ad programmatic and it could dynamically insert ads
and being
sensitive to what was going on.
That's right, Kathy, and being able to tie into your standard ad platforms. We make the ad insertion mechanisms available. You're tied into the standard advertising channels, those pipelines that you're used to using, and it could be pre-sold direct campaigns. It could be programmatic pipes. With live news, there's a certain unknown that certain brands may shy away from. You don't know what's going to happen in live news. Do I want my brand? Do I want my Johnson & Johnson soap being shown right next to a riot? I may or may not, but it allows you to then target on the context that's happening, all of the metadata that we have that's being generated around that, on where we are not running afoul of privacy concerns. We can target off IP address and things that guide into geographic zones and help target those ads effectively. So there's a lot that we can do to bring revenue to live events. And then we've from the Amagi side, we've built a whole toolkit that lets you do that easily out of the cloud, and bring those in on the fly.
All right, we have about 3 minutes left, sadly. We'll get the hook pretty soon. I wanted to just ask Will and Brian and Mike for final thoughts on the consumer experience. Are you using quality of experience monitoring, or because you're in the ad sales world, are you watching that every day? And what are you seeing there, or do you need to add that? Talk just a little bit about that as we wrap up.
Well, I mean,
oh, Brian, go ahead. Sorry, go ahead, Brian.
I'll be really brief. I mean, it's really important, the quality of the experience. And obviously Mike talked about it a little bit, but we did a complete News On app sort of rebuild and relaunch last fall. And it's paid off. I mean, the user has to be able to, operate the app really good. We also have pretty high standards for the actual ad quality. Most of the ads that you're going to see on a lot of these news services are actually broadcast advertisers. So the quality of that, megabits per second of the ad have to be, really high quality. It's not like you're going to take some digital ad and then try to show it on a 50-inch TV screen. It wouldn't look good. So, a lot of us have sort of ad standards and quality to make sure that's sort of above board. So thanks.
Will, any thoughts on what are you finding when you go watch that quality of experience monitoring stuff?
Well, I mean, candidly, I think it's everything. I think if the quality of experience for the consumer is not great, they're not going to turn you back on. There's only so many chances that you get to have a new client or a new consumer, a new viewer sample your product. And I know that Brian just mentioned that the refresh of News On. I remember the early days of News On when they were still when it was still kind of a consortium and they were kind of figuring it out, and the user experience was a little wonky. This is years ago, obviously, because Brian's done a great job with the refresh a few months ago. But that's everything, and we want to make sure that we're providing a seamless experience. I think one thing that Mike talked about was being able to dynamically insert ads, and I think with news, it's very hit or miss with brands. They want to be surrounded by news, but there's also a brand safety component that they're thinking about. And I know that the technology is getting better in that space that enables you to make sure that the brand knows kind of the content they're getting involved in too. So to us, it's everything. And I think we're leveraging technology to help us do that.
Thank you, Michael.
And I had one last thing to add on to Will's point there about the technology piece. There's also a movement that's happening right now in contextual. So instead of targeting, there's companies like ComScore that not with the live broadcast, but with an on-demand, they can basically filter a lot of the wording and be able to offer brand safety scores for certain parts of your newscast. So during the weather or sports, we'll have a higher brand safety than maybe the opening story that might talk about the word murder or something. So there are actually technology pieces that allow you to kind of buy this in a contextual way, and you're going to see more and more of that. And that's actually exciting for us because it's going to bring a whole new group of advertisers sort of into the fold and a whole new opportunity for all of our services.
That's great. Michael Page, thoughts?
Yeah, no, I think ad repetition and the user experience, if you're sitting back, I mean, everybody sees it. Ad repetition is probably the number one thing in the OTT connected TV world. And it doesn't matter if you're watching, Discovery, if you're watching our local news, that's where we're really focused in on. And as we put all of our content, our live content plus the Flex content all in one place, being able to make sure that we're measuring frequency on a household basis, not on an average basis, so we can really get that ad repetition under control is really the piece of the equation for us. I think that the user experience, because I've been in the TV business and worked at Tribune when KTLA was really doing a lot of live stream news, and you'd always hear the complaints about, man, I see the same 3 ads over and over and over again. And I think the industry, part of that's caused by, at one time, a lack of volume of advertisers. The other part is just the different ad serving systems talking to each other. And I think as time goes on, we're trying to solve that with our own content and the content that we audience extend and sell through Flex. So I think that's really where the consumer matters the most, is when they see that ad repetitively. It's not a good experience. It reflects poorly on the brand, and reflects poorly upon the sales team.
So Flex can curate the ads coming in from 10 different programmatic
platforms. How we measure and how we target by a household level, and how we ensure that we have some really pretty good systems in place to ensure that when we're serving these ads, we have separation both on an hourly basis and on a daily basis. That we're not at max, we'll serve an ad once every 5 minutes, but what we really try to aim for is a twice a day, 6 times, or twice an hour at the most, 6 times a day type approach. So
interesting. Mike Woods, final thoughts. Consumer experience, monitoring, ad serving.
The viewer experience is everything, and today all TV is streaming. Being able to craft those experiences and be thoughtful about them, about how we present channels to the viewer, and advertising is a key component of that. And as we push forward the boundaries of what is traditional television and what is digital, the next zone, another kind of view into the future is how we bring in advertising and starting to break free of the traditional ad breaks, starting to change the dynamic of how ads are inserted into the content, how we can do that effectively at scale, and create a whole better viewer experience for the channel, where you aren't necessarily beholden to the old school content stops, ad takes over the screen, content starts again paradigm that we've had in the past. It's exciting stuff out ahead, and I'm really proud to be with the Magi, where we're pushing forward the boundaries on the TV of tomorrow.
Well, I want to thank you very much. We're like overtime now. So thanks for I learned a lot during this. Thanks a lot. I'm going to bring back Frederick Rue in a second from Dillette to help me wrap up the conference. But before that, I want to thank our speakers, our VIP speakers on this roundtable. Will Danielson, again, thank you, Senior Vice President of National Sales for the Digital Division of Nexstar Media Group. Brian Hunt, Head of OTT and CTV Ad Sales for Sinclair. Michael Page, Vice President of Sales for Fox TV Stations, and Mike Woods, Senior VP of Product for Amagi. Thanks very much, everyone.
It was a pleasure, Kathy. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathy.
You're welcome.
Take care.
We do, while Fred's coming back, we do a lot of webinars here about revenue for traditional spot TV. So this is so different. This is such a different conversation. It's really interesting to have. Thanks again. And we're bringing Fred back, Bob, the producer. Oh, there he is.
Hi. Hello back, Katie.
Thank you, Frederick.
No, thank you. And thank you to all of the panelists. I think it was, of course, a fantastic event. I think the few takeaways from me as a solution vendor is really, how highly fragmented the audience and the platform on which those audience consume the content is today. And for many of our customers and people in the industry, we've seen that transition period, right? We saw an influx of content on digital, and people wanting to consume more across, of course, the OTT, the connected TV, and so on. But there's a fine-tuning aspect in terms of the content strategy. What is the right stories that's going to resonate with the right person on the right platform? I think one of the panelists made a comment about that we are past the age of taking one story and publishing everywhere, right? That's the missed opportunity to rightfully target the right person. And so what it means for us as a solution vendor is the need to really create at the beginning, at the heart of the production process, that holistic view of your stories, right? Which platform is going to serve which audience on which platform, and that is the essence of this storytelling 360 that Raul talked about. And the second part of this is really to be able to map out your content journey, right? Start the stories on social, expand on OTT, bring your VOD on your VMVPDs. So that's also how you use the type of new technology that we provide, which at the heart also leverage a lot metadata. So metadata for us has always been a big part of what we do, because we see metadata as the way to enrich your content, to better target once you publish it on digital on one end, but also to enrich your production cycle to enable content recommendation, again, as Raul mentioned. And I think the final part of this fragmented world of content publication is the requirement and the need for automation, right? More and more news production systems have to be akin to media supply chain, in which a lot of the decisions are automated to simplify the production and the publication of the content. I'm not advocating automated storage production. The machine have not taken over, but taking away basically, the complexity of creating all of those different versions, different specs for all of those different platforms, and let your platform manage that. And I think the last thing I wanted to mention, because again, Raul mentioned it, and as part of a strategic transition, was a lot to bring all of the technology in the cloud. So the cloud, of course, is great because it enables you that ubiquity of access to your content, remote users everywhere, and the scalability of your operation. But there was another thought behind that, was to actually to be able to provide a solution as a service. Because if we hear anything today, is that the way the market evolved, there is a highly diverse ecosystem of technology. There's an unknown in terms of how much processing power, how many users I need to run on my system. And so we want to take away from our user the complexity of managing this infrastructure, so they can focus on the content strategy, the monetization, and of course the user experience. So it's really part of our transition to offer all of our platform as SaaS, so that we can enable them to really concentrate or where their time is best spent, and where they can get the best ROI for their efforts. Again, I want to thank you for having me today. I think it was a fantastic event. And again, I hope to see as many possible as you during NAB, so we can finally see each other face to face. Thank you again.
Thank you very much, Frederick Rue. I know you folks have a big event coming up on the 23rd.
Correct.
At NAB. We'll see you at News Tech Forum, or I'm sure there will be another conversation about streaming and just how complicated things have gotten. So that's happening December 13th and 14th in New York City. Yes.
Yes. Finally.
People can't travel. So thanks again to everyone who's been here. Thanks again to Dillette, our title sponsor, and our other sponsors, Amagi and Wide Orbit. We're so happy you enabled this event. Thanks to our audience for hanging in there all afternoon, and see you next time. Bye-bye, Fred.
Thank you. Bye-bye.